Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. I'm really excited today for this guest, and I know you will be too. Alex and I connected back on Instagram when I first started my account, and I knew that I wanted to have her on Carnivorist Chats when I started my podcast because our journey is so similar. This young lady is a marvel because her journey from vegetarianism to veganism and now to animal-based carnivore mirrors my own so similarly. And I think you're going to be really inspired by what she has to share with us today. So, Alex, welcome to Carnivorous Chats.
Thank you so much, James. I am beyond excited to be here. Like you said, this has kind of been long awaited. We have parallel journeys, kind of like a divine intervention of the universe sort of thing, it feels like. So I am so thankful to be here with you today.
For those folks and we'll get into where they can find you online, but your handle is Healing by the Sun. Before we get into your journey, why did you pick that title for your Instagram handle?
Oh gosh, for me, I think it's always that even from a really young age, I've been just like I just love the outdoors, love being outside. I've always just been drawn to like constellations, the moon and the sun just have always like marveled me. I just love looking up, and it always reminds me that perspective is everything, and we're so much smaller in this massive world. And sometimes because of our health journeys or depression or anxiety or things we may be going through, we get so wrapped up in our own head and we forget how big and amazing the world is. And so it's just kind of one of those things where also my health journey and getting to a process of healing very much for me is also incorporating my back with the things I love, which is being outside, being in the sunlight, which is so healing. I'm sure you feel the same way. And being outdoors, all those things are so beneficial to both my mental and physical health as well, beyond the eating and way of life. So
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I totally agree with you. Part of this journey for me is that reconnection with the earth again, because even though being vegan is fundamentally supposed to be about connecting with nature and the earth, I find now more as a carnivore, my spirituality and my contact with nature is so much more appreciative. We'll get into the details about that and adding back in the animal foods when you did. But Alex, let's jump off right away. I'd like you to just give the listeners, if you could, a little background. And again, so similar in that when we were chatting, your mom and my mom were vegetarians. My mom's still a vegetarian.
yes.
And
Yes, that's mine.
please tell
Yes.
us about your family upbringing and what transpired in the beginning stages for Alex Ball.
So my background was I'm an only child, grew up in Chicago, up north, and both of my parents were very much the quintessential, quote unquote, by the US standards, very healthy, like super green. My mom was a vegetarian, always trying to do the latest fad diet. There was the master cleanse, I remember. There was the cranberry juice diet, cabbage juice diets, all these, random ones she found on the internet, always vegetarian based, and was always going from one to the other because she was struggling some with just like not being happy with her weight and just not feeling good in her body and weird symptoms. And so she was always seeking a different diet to try and be that fix for it. And then my dad was kind of just going along with what she would do, and then would eat a little bit of animal protein, but very minimal exposure as a kid to any type of protein that wasn't either a dry pork tenderloin that I hated anyways. And if I tasted a bite of it, I was like, if this is meat, I don't want anything to do with it. I hate the taste. It's dry. It's disgusting. And so my exposure to any type of animal foods was either no fat dairy that again had no flavor, I didn't digest it well, didn't like it anyways, or lean turkey, chicken, fish, occasionally, again, just very little exposure to those things. And the exposure I had, I didn't like. And so I just assumed all meat was like that. I never had a steak. I'd never had any of that stuff. And so very much developed a stigma from an early age that meat was bad, kind of not good. You don't need it, not essential. If I saw like someone eating a rare steak or something, I was like, oh gosh, that doesn't look, because I'd had no exposure to it. And also from a very early age, I started developing a lot of very strong symptoms and sicknesses. I was constantly fighting sinus infections. I was having throat issues, ear infections, all of these types of infections, particularly of like the nose, throat, ears. And so, of course, what's the first thing that they put you on? Rounds and rounds and rounds of antibiotics, one after the other after the other. I remember one time for an ear infection as a kid when I was just 8 years old, they put me on the same strain of antibiotics 4 times in a row, even though it wasn't working and my body had clearly developed a resistance to it. They were just convinced that if they kept upping the dose, it would just somehow work and break the infection. The infection only got worse. I ended up being hospitalized because it got so bad. And then on top of that, I'd had 4 rounds of antibiotics in my system that had done nothing except for cause horrible digestive distress. I developed all these GI issues that resulted from this chronic antibiotic use as a kid. And so from that, spurring on to that and continuing on with also a pretty nutrient deficient diet as a kid of, again, very little, almost no animal foods and a lot of grains and high carb. And again, they were healthy because they were whole grains and things like that, whole wheat bread, whole wheat pasta, a vegetable on the side, beans, tons of beans and legumes and nuts, all these oxalates. So I had kind of this vicious cycle as a kid of eating all of these foods that my digestive system then couldn't deal with, particularly from like elementary to middle school, dealing with all this digestive distress. On top of that, infections that were being treated with antibiotics that then made the digestive distress worse. And then all of this, my body's being fueled with very complex plant foods that it can't break down even more so because of all of these other things coming into my body.
What I find is, and I'm talking to a lot of people now, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's the folks that dabble in the vegan diet, and when I say dabble, maybe a year, maybe even less, and they see that it's not working for them. We'll get into the length of the time that you stayed, but it's particularly challenging, I find. And again, this is where our journey mirrors one another, because not obviously when I was younger, but as I got a little bit older and had been pescatarian and vegetarian for a long time, I too started being pushed these antibiotics. I would get
Oh,
epididymitis, which for
gosh,
those
yeah.
that don't know is swelling of the male testes where it feels like you have a clamp, a vice grip on there. And then I had constant infections and I kept being pushed on the fluoroquinolones, ciprofloxacin. And I must have taken, I don't know how many rounds of that over the years,
Mm.
but it's those folks like you and I whose journey includes those antibiotics and such heavy burden, and then the gut dysbiosis, and then remaining vegan on top of it, that have the hardest journey, isn't it?
So hard. One thing that I've struggled with chronically since that time, and I'm convinced it's because, like you said, of this sort of vicious cycle of when we were on a longer timeline stemming from a younger age with this, is that I was having these staph infections, so staphylococcus in my ears. And it would, what happened is I'd have these reoccurring boils, which is essentially like a cyst that you can't really get rid of. You can't poke it, you can't drain it, because again, it'll cause the staph to potentially infect your whole body. And I would develop them in my inner ear canals. And each time they would say, well, we can't, obviously treat these with the last antibiotic we tried, whether it was amoxicillin, penicillin, whatever, because my body would reject them because they'd been, used so many times. But I'd have these reoccurring infections. And again, my body had no ability to fight them off. And then the antibiotics that were given to me were just exacerbating the issue. And it wasn't until I actually took the risk of literally, I refused from 3 different doctors I went to who said, if you don't go on these antibiotics, you could die from the staphylococcus infection in your ear. And I said, I'm probably actually more likely to die from the toxicity of antibiotics at this point. And so I took the risk of rejecting the medications, and I have since then never had the reoccurring boils come back in my right ear, which I had chronically for 6 years, both through middle and high school. And again, the doctor said I was crazy. They were like, there's absolutely no way, if you don't take these, you could die. And I was just willing to take that risk because, again, by that point, I had taken so many rounds. I knew if by that point, this is just not right. There's got to be something better at this point. And that's when I really started doing my own research. And unfortunately, I still went down the vegan route and had some, issues, but it did start a trend of me beginning to question doctors and just the status quo of just go to the doctor, get a prescription, move on with your life, add it to the list. And that's something that's very near and dear to my heart because, again, for a number of the issues I faced, that was the protocol that was prescribed.
One thing you can say about us, and especially the current vegans as well, I mean, we went and did it for all the right reasons at the time that we thought: the environment, our health, all these things. And we can ultimately say, and Dr. Ken Berry, when I was at KetoCon recently, said this eloquently. He's like, vegans are intuitively smart because they're looking at their own health. They're making food dietary related choices for their own health. So many people aren't doing that. So we can't fault them because, as we now know, there's so much propaganda out there that, I remember doing searches online. What's the healthiest diet? Plant-based. What should I be eating? All vegetables, and, reduce your risk of colon cancer and all these things. But let me just go back a second to you're in high school and you went full high carb, low fat vegan, and you began endurance training. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, that's right. So again, the one beauty of the vegan diet, just like you said, is that you're coming from a good place of you're seeking something that is not the status quo, that is not the sad standard American diet. So that was where that came from, was, again, both the endurance training and all of that, and the veganism came from I want to challenge my body. I want to seek out good nutrition, and I want to help the environment, and I want to do all these good things. And so these were the first things that popped up. My dad was a marathon runner and also was a collegiate swimmer. So he, again, came from a very strong cardio athletic background. I very much had looked up to him and thought, I can never do that. I can never be that way. I'll never be able to run or do the things my dad can do. And then from a dietary perspective, at the same time, I thought, well, what's the diet that's potentially going to help me become, have more energy, be lighter on my feet, while at the same time align with my values of wanting to save the earth and do all of those things and be the, eco green gal that I was like desiring to be at the time. And so I did some research online, and I learned about this guy named Rich Roll, and he was this athlete, vegan, had turned his life around from being an alcoholic and had completely become this ultra marathon runner and all these things. And I read his book. I just fell in love and kind of, again, developed this identity and went all in. So starting through high school, all through high school, and that transitioned all the way through college. So for 8 years, I developed a kind of an identity around becoming the athlete I never thought I could be. So I started doing half triathlons, half Ironmans, then transitioned into full ones, went all in, while simultaneously developed a stronger and stronger and stronger, more extreme version of a high carb, low fat vegan protocol of diet. And my health, I think it's kind of interesting. You go on like a little high where you lose a little weight, you kind of get a little energy, you have a little spike of, oh my gosh, I'm riding this high, everything's perfect. My training was going incredible. I was shedding minutes off of my mile times. I was on cloud 9. And that lasted for all of about 6 months. And then it just completely tanked and everything went the opposite direction. My weight started I just was shedding pounds and not even trying to. I'd become far too extreme with my diet. I had taken out all fats, literally all fats. I was the girl who literally for breakfast was having like an entire watermelon, and date and banana smoothies for lunch, and massive salads at night of basically just roughage to keep me full, just full fiber to get my, stomach feeling full because it had no calories in it. And I was doing insane amounts of training. It's something where I should have been eating 4,000 plus calories a day and was eating probably a third of that. And the calories I was getting, again, were from sources where it wasn't true nutrition. And I very quickly developed massive deficiencies, B12 deficiency, severe iron deficiency anemia, chronic fatigue. My hair started falling out in clumps. I would literally wake up in the morning, I would look on the pillow and be scared that all my hair had fallen out. And I would see I had bald patches, extreme fatigue. I mean, all of the symptoms started compounding and compounding and compounding. Digestive distress was the worst it's ever been in my life because, again, you take an extreme amount of fiber from trying to keep yourself full when you're starving yourself unintentionally. And I would wake up so bloated in the mornings that I looked pregnant. And again, I had stick legs and arms because I was so malnutritioned. And again, training so much on running on empty, but my stomach was trying to hold on to the bare minimum that I was giving it. And I did that for about 4 years, went on that cycle. I cannot believe it.
You can just imagine I'm reliving again, and it's
Yeah.
taking me back to exactly what happened with me. First went vegan, felt great. I lost some weight. I was like, this is really great. The energy spiked up. I was exercising again, riding. A few years in, I should have noticed, but I didn't, that things were starting to change. I was noticing I wasn't feeling as good. I was getting more fatigued. I couldn't ride as hard as I used to. No matter how much I ate, I kept dropping weight. I was getting really emaciated. And I was like, nonsense, this is the best diet. I kept cramming fiber after fiber in. I started bleeding from my bowels, thought I had colitis. My skin and nails started to crack. I remember looking in the mirror going, oh my God, what's happening to me? My hair was falling out all over my body, from my chest to my head to my legs. I developed a severe fungal infection, like to the point where my tongue was coated and I knew my whole digestive tract was
Yeah.
coated.
My tongue was so white and thick with I swear it was probably from just the malnutrition and also from SIBO. And I struggled huge with SIBO, IBS, all of that intestinal bacterial overgrowth in the stomach that, again, like you said, that will show in other areas. So my tongue was thick and white. I had this sunken in, literally it looked like I had concave. My face had sunken in so much and was so pale, even when the rest of my body was tan from working outside. It was just insane. And again, the hair loss as well, all of that together piled with chronic severe fatigue.
The fatigue was excruciating for me.
Yeah.
Alex, I was in bed and people are making, now that I'm telling my story, of course, the vegans are attacking me online, which is fine. They can go there. But I got thick skin with this. My job is now, I'm just warning. I'm warning from experience. There's probably other people out there that need this assistance. And someone's going to listen to your story, Alex, and it's going to resonate and you're going to change lives. That's how impactful this is. Some of the comments they make were, well, you weren't doing the diet right. You needed to supplement with B12, Alex. That's why you were deficient. So what do you say to those folks now? They're saying, oh, you weren't doing it correctly. You should have done this. You weren't eating the right foods.
I have tried I will say I was vegan for a total of 10 years, and then was vegetarian for obviously even longer, almost since birth, essentially. And I have tried every version of the vegan diet. I also it baffles me currently now, and even though I'm not fully haven't fully healed everything. It's again, it's a timeline. You can't heal instantly or overnight. When I think about the number, when I had hit this point of my health being so poor, and I was trying to, save myself while staying vegan because I was so scared to leave that identity that I'd created for myself. The amount I was spending in money on supplements, trying to, I had an entire cabinet full of supplement you can think of because my diet was so deplete. I had liquid B12, I had liquid iron I was taking, protein powders, chlorella, spirulina for the iron because that was a better source than the medicine. And then I had every supplement under the sun, maca powder, ashwagandha. I was spending so much money on both natural and powder, liquid version, all of these things, because again, I was so convinced that this is the diet that I'm supposed to be following, and I'm trying, and I've tried different versions of it, but clearly it's just a diet where you just have to supplement. And you take a step back and you think, okay, it's a diet. Diet means not to lose weight. The actual word diet means like what makes up what you eat. And that's meant to fuel your body. That's meant to provide nutrients for your body. So why do I have a diet where I literally have to have an entire other separate diet of just pills and supplements to supplement my food diet, if that makes sense? And you take a step back and you think about that. And that also my grocery bill was more expensive again in supplements every single month than in food. And something was wrong there in my mind. And I began to question especially last year and a half of my veganism, where, as I shared with you, I was literally in bed 20 of 24 hours a day. I was so exhausted. I would get up, essentially crawl to the kitchen, eat my massive sort of binge meal, because again, it's all I had energy for was to eat once a day to get out of bed. And it was all this roughage and fiber that my body had no ability to digest by this point. And then with my bloated, uncomfortable belly, would sit there, take all the supplements on top of that, go back to bed and lay in bed and just, again, do this over and over again. And my life was like that for the last 6 months of my veganism, where I was essentially dead, barely living. And it doesn't count as living. When I look back on that time, it's almost like a black hole where my brain fog was so bad. And I was so compromised both mentally and physically by that point that I literally had to leave my job. I had no relationships. I was isolated. I was living in my house, really wasn't even truly able to take care of myself, and was taking all these supplements and still eating this way. Because again, I was so scared to leave this identity that I had formed of myself. And I know that I'm going on a tangent here, but it was lying in bed week after week, looking up at the ceiling, thinking, okay, I claim to be this fit vegan athlete. Here I am again, 20 of 24 hours a day, lying in bed. It hurts to even breathe. So clearly that identity is not for me, and that something's wrong here. And I finally hit my breaking point in that moment when I realized, well, that's what I'm claiming to be, but it's not even working anymore. I'm not even that. I can't even try to be that anymore or profess to be that anymore. I'm scared every morning I won't wake up.
You telling your story, God bless you, and thank you for sharing your journey thus far. I mean, this is unbelievable how similar our journeys are. As you know, probably from listening to me laying there in bed, thinking to myself, okay, I don't want to live in this body anymore. I'm in too much pain. I'm too fatigued. Like you, if I could get up out of bed, I was so exhausted all the time, just scared. I was really, really scared. You kind of touched on it a little bit there, Alice, how I love this part of the story because you're lying there, but like me, ideology and diet, and again, the vegans came back to me. It's not a diet; it's a way of living.
Right.
How did you wrap your head around that? Because like you, I had community, I had online presence, I was posting about this. How did you do
Absolutely.
that? What were the next steps?
And that's one of, like I told you, one of the biggest things that was the hardest part of this journey for me, and where I think a lot of, particularly, and this is very near and dear to my heart, women, young women who are in their 20s. I'm 26 now. At the time I was in, this whole sort of timeline was from when I was 20 to 24. And you very much, it's such an identity thing. And it's very easy in today's day and age with so much of social media being pro veganism and, all of these hip products and, oat milk this and all these things that it's very easy to become wed to that, or again, as a young female, feel like that's what you should be doing and all these things. But again, like you said, it totally goes against what we need for proper menstruation, with female hormones, all these things. And for me, it was really realizing that even though I had formed this identity, I have the ability to always in life create a new version of myself. And that version I should be seeking for myself is always an improved version. I should always be seeking in life, whether it's now, whether it was years in the past, to always be sharpening my mind, healing my body, all these things. And if a version that I currently am in is not serving me anymore, I have the ability to shed that. And we are allowed in life to question, to wonder, to take what we learned, realize maybe, hey, that wasn't right at the time. It's all I knew, or it's what was being told to me was right or the best, or what I was seeking for myself. And so there was a version of me, there was a version of Alex that wanted to be an athlete, wanted to push herself. And so she sought out this endurance training. She sought out this diet, and this looked to be right. So she tried it. And I realized, again, would I do it over again? No, but I have the ability now with what I know, and from taking, matters in my own hands and researching and realizing, opening my eyes a little bit to that there are things outside of veganism. There are ways of eating that actually were capable of healing me as well, that if I didn't try it, then I would never know and I would die. Essentially, it got to that point. And so that's so much what I tell when a lot of times I have women reach out to me online and say, oh my gosh, I'm currently going through this. I'm lying in bed. I'm so tired. What am I doing wrong? Why is this not working? This is what I've been told is right, or this is what my friends are doing. And I always just say, listen, I have been there, but you have the ability to say, okay, if this is serving me, if I'm thriving, great. But if I am struggling and dying inside and I know something is not working for me, it's okay for me to try something else. And it's okay for me to say that may be an identity I formed. But again, what if I try something else? What if I seek out being somebody else for once? And that opened up again so much for me. This was a much bigger thing than just the eating. It was the ability to shift and to develop into a better version of myself, whatever that was, and to not be the vegan athlete anymore, just to be me again. And so it's very much also just finding myself again.
Oh, I love it. I just love conversing with you, Alex. You're amazing. You're amazing. And I speak for the rest of us by saying thank you for making that decision, because
Oh,
I said to myself, Alex, when I was lying there and I was so sick and I was listening to podcasts and trying to figure out a way, I said, if, Lord above, if you please find fit for me to be able to heal myself, I was going to make it my mission to start to tell my story and invite folks to share their story, to, like yourself, to be able to help others. Like you said, with people reaching out, I have people reaching out all the time.
the time.
And
Yeah.
like you said, if you're thriving, great. But what I've come to find is so many folks aren't really presenting their true selves online. They will
Mm-mm.
portray something, even I don't know if it's accurate or not, but even Rich Roll himself, I know, is struggling now with the diet. And
Yes. Fatigue, a lot of those things that I have
yeah.
noticed. That's interesting,
So what did you, Alex, what was the first things you added back in? For me, it was fish because it was most known to me here in Bermuda. So what did you choose first?
I always laugh when I talk about how I went about this, because again, I always say no one should have any shame with when if they're trying to add animal products back in with how they go about it. Because for everybody, your level of comfort may be huge. If you grew up with your dad grilling steaks, or whatever. If you're like me, it was. I mean, I was the girl who would hold her breath and literally plug her nose as a kid walking past the meat section. I was so scared of meat. Like it just petrified me. So even before I started adding animal products, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I just am sharing this because again, I know that there's other women, particularly, and just people in general who have come from a background where they're so afraid of animal products, but I just like familiarized myself at the grocery store with like, hey, like there's these meats in the meat section, and I would walk by them and all of that. Finally started with eggs. I would eat like one scrambled egg, way overcooked. I was terrified of raw yolk or anything like that. But I mean, it was like crumbly and crusty in the pan. And then finally was comfortable adding in seafood, only canned. I was terrified of cooking anything raw. So canned tuna, some canned salmon, some smoked salmon, kind of started working my way, gradually. And so finally, after a couple months of that, I noticed though that my body was just like, oh my gosh, we've never had these nutrients before. And I was actually the choline that's in eggs, I had an insane craving for. So funny enough, when I started my journey, so much of there was very specific nutrients that I know I was so devoid in that I had very intense and specific cravings for things. So I was eating eventually up to almost 12 eggs a day, which I don't need to do anymore now because again, I've got my nutrients stable again. But I was so deficient in choline that once I started eating eggs, my body was just, we want more of this, we want more of this, we want more of this. So there was a time where I was eating a huge amount of eggs and then that seafood. Finally got myself comfortable enough to have some, again, very lean though, chicken, turkey. Usually there were deli slices already pre-cooked. And I finally hit my breaking point where I was looking at all these things on social media, these gorgeous steaks, and then people cooking on this way of eating. And I said, okay, there's got to be something to this. There's kind of, again, questioning, what I'd been doing, wanted to become a better version of myself, and had been so scared of fat, animal fats, particularly. Again, that stigma of always eat low fat this, low fat that. Finally said, I'm never going to know unless I try. So cooked my first steak myself. The thing was so overcooked. It was gray, burnt. Went through a week of cooking steaks and any form of red meat like this because I was so scared again. And then realized, well, it's probably not meant to taste better. I mean, so bad that I would want to lick the inside of the oven over eating this. So finally worked to start cooking them less and less, having them medium rare finally. And my mind just like exploded. Realizing how delicious this was, how satisfying it was, and becoming just, again, allowing myself to go on a timeline of you don't have to have this all figured out today. For me, I was animal based a year and a half before I even went carnivore. And again, all of this viewing it as my body is a place for me to experiment and just to see how I feel and to see what happens. And now I'm to the point where I've been exactly as of yesterday, actually 6 months carnivore and have woohoo no intentions of changing that anytime soon because I finally, honestly, about 2 months ago was able to really just completely let go for the first time in my entire life of not being afraid of fat to where I could just eat absolutely as much animal fat as I wanted. And the amount of just progress in that small time frame of a few months of doing that compared to my entire time frame of adding in animal products blew my mind in terms of the sleep, the mental clarity, all these things. And so I'm like, again, it's a new part of the journey. It's a new part of trying new things, being willing to realize that you've been wrong in the past. When I first started animal-based, again, lean chicken and turkey doesn't work for me. It does not help heal my digestion. After being devoid for so long of good quality animal protein and fats, my body is just like, thank you. I can just tell it is so grateful and soaking up every bit of it. And I've never felt so good. I can't remember the last time that I slept through the night, or that I had mental clarity like this, or the ability to get out of bed without an alarm clock, have proper circadian rhythms again, things like this. So again, I apologize for the long tangent, but it's amazing to see again that you have the ability to always regroup and be willing to change and try new things. And then, it's like, wow, again, this is possible. It is possible for me to do this. And these are things that 2 years ago I could have never dreamed of doing on my own, and being capable of letting go of other things.
We now know, we were talking earlier before we started recording about intuitive eating. I now know, I appreciate the intuitive signals my body gives me now. I could not get enough fat like you when I started. My body had been starved as a vegan of fat.
Starved.
And
So
I need to ask you this, because what I've come to understand, and specifically for me, because I have gallbladder issues. Did you have issues with the fat adaptation earlier on, digesting the fats? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle that?
So when I first began, I've always struggled, again, because of both the antibiotic use as a young kid, and then with all of the high carb, low vegan way of eating, I wrecked my digestive system. So I'm still on a trajectory of fully healing that part of me that was just damaged time and time again, year after year after year. So I was very anxious also, not just from the fear of fats from like a diet perspective, but also from how my body, like you said, would react to them after being literally afraid of a gram of fat as a vegan for years, to eating, an entire spoonful of tallow and not even thinking of it, or having a fatty cut of meat that I slow cooked in fatty bone broth and all these things. Now, what I found to be the biggest game changers for me were essentially kind of with my meals, not eating the fat fast, being really, really careful about slow, mindful eating, sitting down to eat, as someone who's also struggled with anxiety, being very anxious to eat, trying to get my nervous system to calm down before a meal. Because if I start that meal anxious, I can feel my stomach seize up and it's already nervous about the food that I'm about to put into it. The other thing is bone broth. I make a tremendous amount of bone broth, and starting my meals with sipping some bone broth, something warming, because again, that warming temperatures are a very big thing with the body, particularly with females. If you're always having cold foods around your cycle, those things all are connected. So again, a big transition from someone who used to eat ice cold smoothies full of mango in the middle of winter and just completely off of her, again, listening to my body, and when it was craving warming things, sipping on that bone broth. And then also things to combat the nausea. What I noticed was I was at first repulsed actually because again, my body was so not used to it. I would be craving the fat. So I'd eat it and instantly would feel so nauseous, because my body just didn't know how to handle it. So a lot of it was being slow with that eating, slow with bringing it in, and then also not always having the fats hot, if that makes sense. So sometimes I keep tallow in the fridge cold. I don't have to do this as much now because again, my body is comfortable with it now, and I even eat very high fat now. But at first I found that if I had hot liquid fat, so like tallow that was rendered in the pan, or bacon grease that was rendered and hot, those things would instantly kick off the nausea, instantly would cause for me either severe diarrhea or just indigestion, heartburn, kind of weird symptoms. And so for me, it was slowly working up to increasing the proportion of fat I could have each day slowly, and then also slowly transitioning to where I wouldn't have to eat those fats cold, or cold fatty meats. I could now warm them in the pan some. But just again, doing that a little bit by bit each week. And then also I did supplement with like some green tea. Some ginger tea at first, a few natural things like that, that just helped calm that because I had so much inflammation in my stomach that I was having to deal with, and a body that just was so not used to both protein and fat.
Let's talk about the wins now that you're 6 months in. You listed a couple for me. I love the wins. You said, you just touched on it. You're sleeping better than you have in 10 years. Me too. Digestion's improving. OCD, this is what I wanted you to touch on. So many folks touch on, and specifically for us, the physical benefits, but talk about also the mental benefits, the brain fog lifting, the depression and anxiety. How did that come about for you?
So for me, all growing up, I had severe OCD and anxiety, and it stemmed from some trauma that I faced as a child. And also just from none of that never being addressed. And so every time I went to a therapist, they recommended I go on SSRIs, go on depression or anxiety medications, anything like that. And that was the first thing, that was just, you need to see a therapist and you need to get on drugs. That's just going to be your story. You have anxiety. That's just normal. All kids today have either ADHD or anxiety or OCD. So you're just more than normal, and for me, I always was like, I just could not accept that. So I never accepted just immediately as the status quo that I'm going to be on drugs for the rest of my life. And again, I understand there's a time and a place for that. And, it's everybody's their own personal story, of course. But for me, I just wasn't ready to accept that as my, just forever, for the rest of your life. And so I just struggled with that continually through college, for all these things. I struggled year after year after year. And my anxiety, particularly when I was vegan, again, coupled with that brain fog, was so bad that I had constant rushing thoughts. So even when I would physically be doing nothing, I would be so exhausted from my mind just through the day, just getting through a day without having 400,000 racing thoughts of the what ifs and again, nothing was happening. And but I was always the worst case scenario, or just could not calm my brain. My brain felt like it was running 200 miles an hour constantly. And I have not felt relief from that until I added animal products. And I kid you not. But specifically, I have not found a peaceful and calm mind to where I can actually sit there and like read a book, actually sit and read a book and not have my mind be trying to pull me in a million different directions, or have like the mental clarity to get through a project and not constantly be distracted or so anxious to sit for a minute or to be with myself long enough, just with myself in my body, and not feel so uncomfortable. The first time that I ever felt this again since I don't even remember, was when I went fully carnivore. That was the first time I said, oh my gosh, in my life, I think, again, fat is so important for proper brain function. I realized all of those years growing up vegetarian, and then again, low fat, going high carb, low fat vegan, low fat, that was never giving my brain the proper fuel to function properly. My brain was always was lacking in that. So when it was finally being like supercharged the first time in my life with proper, good fat nourishment, I could sleep. And again, I used to wake up 10 times, I kid you not, minimum in the night, every 30 minutes. It was like you could literally set up alarm clocks. I was up, 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 up. And after 2 weeks of full carnivore for the first time in my life, I was only waking up 1 to 2 times a night, which was life-changing for me. And once you start with proper sleep, then that starts with proper, again, mental health can improve. Sleep is so vital. And so again, these things go way beyond diet. It's not just how you eat to like look a certain way, whatever things, but the mental health connection has been just life-changing for me. Because again, now I can get to the day, I'm so much more productive. My circadian rhythms are aligned. So I get a full, now only wake up maybe once, again, sometimes twice, rarely in the night. And that full set of sleep enables me to have a calmer mind, to be productive, to be able to do things again that I never thought possible because my brain I thought was so messed up, like be able to focus enough to read or to complete a task or to be productive at work or to even just sit and enjoy and be able to savor life again because I feel like I'm in my right mind to do so again.
I, like you, lost my job when I was vegan, and all my the rest of my colleagues knew I was vegan. I couldn't see it at the time, but the brain fog was impacting my daily duties. I was becoming so forgetful. I was sitting there
Oh my
typing. I tell this
gosh.
story all the time. I was typing something, and I'm like, "What am I doing? Is this part of my getting old? What is happening here?"
That
You
happened
know,
to me every day. I kid you not.
and
Oh my gosh.
and then I went to my doctor and said, I'm anxious all the time. I was really wound up like a clock. And he's like, he wanted to put me on antidepressants. I never ended up taking them because I'm like, but I'm not depressed. I can't stop my brain like you. I was up every couple of hours. I remember
Yep.
someone suggested meditating. What a joke that was. I try and sit there,
I
Alex, and
can't
my
even
brain
sit
was
there
just
for
going,
1 minute.
no,
Yeah.
yeah.
Nope.
Oh,
Yep.
there was a reel that I put up where it was a joke, but that's how it used to be with me. It's like the Kevin from The Office going, it's been 45 seconds, Kevin. Call it. I can't do it anymore. I just couldn't do
My
it. But
favorite show, by the way. Yeah.
oh, I love The Office. I
So
love
relatable.
it.
Yes.
But that was exactly me. I could not get my brain. I had the monkey mind. It would just not stop. It was going, 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 going. And it was awful. And ever
Exactly.
since I added animal foods back in, and us ex-vegans and many of the folks who added talk about the lights coming back on, I had that moment where I was walking. I was like,
True.
I'm thinking clearly again. The fog is starting. I could literally feel it going. I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is unbelievable. I didn't
I
know I could
know.
feel like this again.
I like to say I was essentially in hibernation for the worst 4 years of that veganism. I was literally the last 4 years that I feel like my brain had just gone to sleep. It just said, we're either going to die or she's finally going to give us what we need. So we're just going to quit functioning properly. And like you said, I mean, I would go into work and I essentially, I hate to say it, was pretending to do my job because I was so not in my right mind to be able to do it properly. So it was just sort of like going in there and to complete a task, I'd have to write it down 10 times to even remember to be able to do it. And again, with my coworkers, they knew I was vegan and all of this, but they're like, well, that's supposed to be healthy and everything. And again, we're trying to increase exposure here to that looks all shiny and bright and great. And then someone there could be just pretending and going through the motions, barely getting by, and behind the scenes isn't even functioning properly.
Okay, we've talked about what happened to us. We talked about the mind, what happened to our bodies, what happened, the success afterwards. But people need to know this is an ongoing journey. This is a journey that's going to take some time. People expect healing in days when, we took us a long time to get sick. We didn't get sick overnight. So healing can take some time, as I often like to say. A
So
couple of
true.
the things that you've posted that I'm going to read out back to you that really impacted me. And again, thanks for posting these on your posts are that you had to forgive yourself for all the abuse you put your body through. I think that's so important. Another one is that you're in the driver's seat of your destiny now. Very powerful. And the last one is we may be imperfect, but we're raw and real. Talk to us about those three things, please, before we end out.
Whew, those hit that, and it makes me emotional to think about because again, I always like to say I look at a past version of myself and I say she was doing the best with what she had at the time. I never was doing triathlon saying I'm trying to break my bones here and run my feet into the ground and exhaust myself and deplete my hormones further. It was that young girl who just wanted to be an athlete like her dad. And I, because of my background also for what I studied in school, I had a major in soil science and sustainable agriculture, and very much those majors and that side of agriculture a lot of times draws veganism, all those things. So again, I was around an environment where it was growing vegetables and all these things. So again, I wanted to be part of that community. I wanted to belong. So knowing that a lot of my intentions again came from pure instinctual things that we as people want, which is to belong, is to feel love, is to be a part of something, and to also want the best for ourselves. And sometimes we don't know what that is, and we have to go on a journey to find that. So for me, I always look back, and it's so easy for me to wake up and go, I wasted 4, you could even say 8 years of my life. What happened? Those were my 20s. Those are supposed to be, everybody says, oh, your early 20s are the best years of your life. And I say, I look back at my early 20s and wish they'd never happened, and am sad, and then I say, hold on, stop, go back. If you had never gone through that, you would have never realized that, one, like I said, you have the ability to start again, to form a new identity for yourself that's even better. And then also you have the ability to help others who also go on a similar journey. And for me, it's emotional when I'll wake up sometimes and I'll look, hopefully not right at my phone when I first wake up, but see these long texts from girls, usually reaching out on Instagram or some form of social media saying, again, like, I'm lying in bed right now. I do not know what to do. I came across your profile, and is that really true? Or do you really think that's good? Or like, how do I even start? Feeling overwhelmed. And knowing that if I'm able to break through a barrier like that, that felt so insurmountable, and like, again, all I was the time, that anybody can do it. And that you, again, are so equipped and you're so strong that even if you're to the point where, like me, you could not even get out of bed every day, you have the ability, you are strong enough to be in the driver's seat of your healing, even when you're at your lowest. And just having that strong seed of determination is all you need to start, because that can slowly grow, and it's a trajectory that does not happen overnight. And once you finally give yourself that grace to trip and fall, like you would give anybody else, and say, it's okay, you don't know immediately, you're not supposed to have it all figured out day one, that once you apply that grace to yourself, you are free to really explore and to try things that can provide huge healing. And like I said, I'm, again, now finally on like the best version I've ever been on of this journey for me, which has really just been the last 2 to 4 months so of letting go of another stack in what was my identity of like low fat, being, again, afraid of embracing that full fat carnivore approach. And now coming onto that, experiencing even more healing. So again, it didn't happen overnight for me. I'm on the second year of my journey here, and it's only getting better, but that's because I started somewhere, and I didn't start high fat carnivore overnight and have, oh my gosh, everything, my sleep's, perfect now. And all, no. Some of those things are just now coming to fruition, but it's because I started somewhere, and I had the grace of myself to know that I'd fall along the way, but at least I was beginning something that was better for me.
The journey of a million miles begins with one step.
One step. That's right. Thank God we took it.
Thank God indeed, Alex. Alex, what a wonderful way to close out this episode. I want to just thank you so much for sharing your story. I
Oh my God.
know you
Thank
are a
you.
star. Your projection is nothing but this. For folks hearing you and hearing you speak so powerfully and so honestly, can't help but really just want to know more about you. So with that being said, where can folks find you online? Where can they go look for you?
So I'm not the best with social media. I always like to say I'm a bit of a grandma in that department, but it's Healing by the Sun on Instagram, all one word. So check me out there. That's I respond to, just feel free to always direct message me there. As I've said many times, I just love connecting with anyone who's just starting this journey, or even curious about it, or where to begin, or how to maybe try and combat some of those fears. So Instagram is my main platform. I just started a TikTok finally with some nudging from a friend, which is also Healing by the Sun as my little handle for that. So I'm going to start trying to post more there. But that is my main place where you can find me. And please feel free to reach out. I love connecting. It's, again, the community that I found on there has kept me going with this, because it's very hard to feel when you're going alone. And because I didn't have the support of family and of like close intermediate friends when I first began this, that can make it also really hard for people. So I always encourage people, it's okay to try and find some connection online. And that's where you really can say social media is a great thing these days, is where, like for us, James, it connected us. And I'm so grateful for that. It can provide insurmountable, huge life-changing connections that make you want to keep going on this journey as well. So please reach out. Yeah.
We're going to have to do this again. I know we're going to have to do this again because there's so much more.
Absolutely.
There's so much more I want to talk to you about, because folks, when you go to Alex's Instagram and you see the food that she is putting down, the pictures, I get jealous. I mean, it looks delicious. It looks so great.
Thank you.
The last thing I just leave us with what you got planned for tonight. Anything exciting? What's on the menu tonight?
Oh man. And this is another thing we were laughing about, is I'm always trying to like get myself to branch out from my go-to meals. But I find that with most people, once you go carnivore or animal based, you really find your main meals that just, you feel so good, both in mental and physical, in a mental and physical state. Once you eat them, that you're just so nourished, you don't want to eat anything else. And so for me, that is my dinner, which is honestly, I do a big, because it's very affordable, just sort of big, throw in the Instant Pot combination of making a bone broth and then using all of the fatty collagenous beef neck bones, pork neck bones, again, that you can get super cheap from your local butcher or grocery store. I get them from my local Publix, and they're not as fancy as a ribeye or anything per se, but when you put them in the Instant Pot with just some water and apple cider vinegar and sea salt, you get the most incredible healing collagenous broth from that. And then also the meat around those bones is just, it's because again, collagen is always what, just like in our bodies, the same thing. It provides that cushioning and everything for your joints and then for your bones as well. So it's the same thing when you eat it. You're getting all of that rich collagen and fat that helps support, for me, which is so important, your bone health and everything. So I love having a big bowl of that bone broth with the fatty collagenous meat. And then actually some of the bones, they become kind of a crunchy, delicious snack. And again, it's great calcium and marrow. So I just throw that all in a bowl, some extra salt, because you always got to have those good electrolytes and salt. And then I always love to have some pork rinds for some crunch on the side. That's my go-to dinner.
Sounds amazing. And I just realized one of the things we didn't talk about today that we should next time, Alex, is we're talking about the dental side of being vegan.
Yes.
That's important. So definitely got to have you back. Alex Ball, this has been an honor and a privilege chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking the time out today to have the conversation. It's just a joy speaking with you. It really is.
Couldn't say more. Just to say the same on my end for you, James. You're just a ray of light, and the wealth of knowledge and also the exposure that you're bringing of how vital this knowledge is, and just sharing that with everybody is helping, again, expand this community, making it a place that people feel that they are in the driver's seat to really improve their health and to question the status quo. So I'm just so grateful to you that we had this connection and that we were able to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. You have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be chatting again soon.
Absolutely, James. Thanks.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to the good folks at Carnivore Bar and Equip Foods. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. And also, don't forget you can book me for a 30-minute carnivore coaching session. Again, the link will be in the show notes. Until the next time, be well.